Hi everyone, in today's hand history, I'm coming at you from the very end of day 2 in the Wynn $3,500 buy-in, 3 million guaranteed event. Most tournaments, end of day 2 usually means we are very deep in the money, at the final table, we're making a lot of money. However, in this tournament, this had a very slow structure, 90-minute levels on day 2. So even though there's only 2 hands left in the night of day 2, not only are we not at an FT or deep, we're actually not even in the money. It is 13% of the field left with 10% paid. So getting close to the money, but we're not quite there. And that's the situation we got. On top of that, my table draw is pretty much all professionals. I was pretty new to the table. I'd only been there for maybe an orbit. And at this point, we're literally 2 hands left of the night. So I play this hand, get 1 more hand, we beg. So it is big blind 5K, and I am dealt the King of Spades and the Queen of Diamonds under the gun 1. So as you can see here, King Queen is a very easy open. It is very profitable open without ICM. With the amount of ICM I'm under, well, not a incredibly high amount, I'm still under a decent amount of ICM pressure. So like this King 10 off, that'd be a bad open. King Jack off, probably not a good open either. Ace 9 off would be awful. These would be bad. So any of these like partial opens, they're just pure folds. I might actually even fold like pocket sixes here. I'd certainly be very close. I'm definitely going to fold 10-8 suited, King 8 suited, King 9 suited, Queen 9 suited, 10-8 suited. I'd probably fold all those hands too. So without ICM, I'm opening 18%. With ICM, I'm probably opening more like 14%, even like 13.5%. So I'm still going to be somewhat loose, but I'm definitely playing very carefully. So with my King of Spades, Queen of Diamonds, under the gun 1, I'm going to raise to 11K at this big blind 5K. MP1 calls, the small blind calls, and the big blind calls. Pretty much everyone covers me, as I was a shorter stack in this, with average being about 60 big blinds. So I'm 4 ways to this flop of the Queen of Spades, the 8 of Spades, and the 4 of Spades. Kind of an awkward spot considering we have 3 opponents. So there are a couple different ways to try to approach this hand. You can do it from a point of looking at it as though you opened an early position and small blind called. They're going to have a pretty strong condensed range, lots of suited hands. Do it from a point of you open an early position with MP1 or MP2 calling, and then seeing how you're supposed to play there. You can do it from a point of you open an early position and big blind calls, and then see how you're supposed to play here. In this case, our key opponent here is a big blind, as he's the only person that calls my flop bet. So I have that put into the solver here just so we can see turn and river decisions. But the flop, we're just going to have a conversation about what my approach is and why, and use that as a means to figure out what my range should look like, what his range looks like, and then how we continue from there. So the way I view multi-way spots is kind of similar as to though I have a hold'em hand, which I do, against a PLO hand. So you want to play very carefully, and you want to make sure that you're largely choosing small bets. The reason being is there aren't going to be that many hands in your range that want to bet large. Very few. So if you choose large bets on a lot of spots, it's going to be very difficult for you to have many hands that even want to bet. But if you choose small bets on a lot of these types of situations, from a theory perspective, but also just from how games normally play out, small bets are going to perform very well. So in most of these multi-way situations, for the most part, especially against professionals, the main size you should be choosing is a small bet of about 25% pot. You could even go a little bit smaller. I'd be completely fine with that too. And the reason being is it's going to clean up a lot of equity. You're going to generate a lot of folds from hands that are probably not really supposed to fold, but the fact that you're multi-way and they can get squeezed out easily. So a small bet's going to perform very well with a lot of hands in your range, and it's also going to make it pretty easy for you to play in general on turns and rivers. So in theory world, early position versus MP, we're supposed to just like pure check here. Early position for small blind, I think we're probably pure betting or pretty close to it. Early position versus big blind, we are definitely pure betting. So the way that I kind of approach this is I just have a fairly condensed betting range that makes up of hands that I want to put in chips with, whether, you know, king high flush draw, ace high flush draw, flop flushes, sets, even top pairs, over pairs, all that type of stuff. Maybe some like ace jack with the jack of spades type hands as well. And I'm pretty much going to bet like all that stuff that wants to continue. I'm going to check some traps. The high flush draws, I just want to bet. So I'm probably going to check trap some sets. Going to check trap some hands like low to mid flushes. And then I'm going to check all my garbage hands. But I don't expect too many people to be exactly aware that I'm going to have this type of approach. And these spots are very, very rare in general anyways. So not too fussed about it. I think having this type of approach versus the vast majority of opponents is going to be by far the easiest way to play in these spots and also going to be the most profitable. Small blind checks, big blind checks. I continuation bet a quarter pot with my king of spades, queen of diamonds, which is top pair with a flush draw. Folds to the big blind who calls. So we're going to look here in Solver World what his calling range is supposed to look like. Obviously, he doesn't have a lot of this type of stuff. I think in game, his calling range is Queen X, flushes, two pairs, sets. He can't have pocket queens, but he certainly could have pocket fours and pocket eights. Queen 4 suited, Queen 8 suited, 8-4 suited. I think he has all those types of hands. I think he certainly can have some nut flush draws as he's probably defending a lot of his ace X. But he also just has like a decent amount of flop flushes and those types of hands as well. So in general, when he calls here, his range is going to be way, way, way stronger than what this says. So it says he's supposed to call 57%. I bet his actual calling range, especially considering how short I am, how many opponents I'm betting into, even though I bet small, my guess it's probably going to be like 20% of hands. So keep that in mind for turn and river decisions. So he calls. The turn is a very good card for me. It is the Queen of Hearts. Gives me trips to go with my flush draw. And obviously he's going to check to me here. So on this turn, with my exact hand, obviously I want to keep betting. In Solver World, I'm sure there's tons of different hands that it wants me to bet for value. And also, I would also assume based off stack depth plus a board being paired plus it being a monotone flop that I probably am largely supposed to pick a quarter pot size. I would be fairly surprised if it goes larger here. So we're going to look at what my betting split's supposed to be. 2/3 pot. That is interesting. Yeah, I'm still kind of surprised by this. So the reason why I thought we'd largely be betting smaller instead of largely going 2/3, in position on turn, you're supposed to be betting large. To me, the exception though, and this is true in a lot of these different types of spots, is on static board textures. So flop is fairly static and the turn is even more static. So usually on these types of spots, we end up getting to bet smaller more frequently. In Solver World, it does look like though we are supposed to pick 2/3 pot. So I guess it's just the adage of in position, if you're going to bet, you better be willing to risk a lot of chips or you should be checking. Anyways, in game though, when I bet flop, considering how strong his range that continues is, I don't think I have that many hands in my range that actually want to go large. I think I have very, very, very few just because his range is so condensed. He has very, very, very strong range here. So both of us just have these really strong ranges going at it. And since I don't really have that many hands that are strong enough to bet large, I think in this spot, it's probably going to be ideal for me to bet fairly small with my entire range. If I bet large here, I'd probably only really do it with like pocket fours, pocket eights, and nut flushes, and that's it. So yeah, in this spot, I think with my king queen, going a quarter pot is going to be ideal. I do get to go quarter pot. It looks like with this exact combo too, it is not preferred, but it is the only combo that does go small. Okay, so I go quarter pot. He calls. River is offsuit 9. So we'll say it's the 9 of diamonds. And he checks. So before I click check here, I'm going to say in the solver, my hand is definitely a bet. It is probably a shove. I have 75K. I guess technically the pot here is smaller than what it was in game. So I guess I'm probably supposed to go 2/3 here. Maybe I get to jam occasionally. That would be my guess. So I would assume it's checking back my exact hand 0% of the time. Yeah, so it looks like it's either half potting or jamming. My exact combo, it is jamming. And in game, I only have 75K. Pot size is 117, so I have 2/3 pot. I would assume in game with my stack to pot ratio, my hand is just a pure shove and nothing else. So what did I do in game? I checked. Not only did I check, I actually think betting here would be a fairly significant mistake. I would be very surprised if I ever got called by a worse hand. And if I could get called by a worse hand, I think it might be his exact combo. And I didn't ask him about this, but I bet if I did, if I asked him, if I had shoved, what would he have done with his exact combo? And I would bet he would fold. I'd bet a lot of money that he would fold. The reason being, so the exact hand that he had, that I beat, was he had Queen X. He had, I guess, Queen, whatever the last queen is, the Queen of Clubs and the Jack of Spades. So he has probably one of the absolute best bluff catchers here. We're going to say that I shoved. Let's look at his Queen Jack. His Queen Jack's all call. But Queen Jack blocking the straight, blocking the flush. Like, it is such an incredible calling hand here. And I would assume that he would fold it after a very long tank, and he would probably be very annoyed that he has to fold. And the reason being is I'm betting flop into 3 people. So 4 ways. I'm betting flop 4 ways. He's calling that bet on this monotone board. His range is strong. My range is strong. We're getting kind of close to the money. I opened off of a 24 big blind stack. My range is strong. Betting into 3 other people. My range is strong. On the turn, the board pairs, and I am betting into his range that has full houses and flushes. My betting range is very, very strong. He calls that bet. His calling range is very strong. So on this river 9, even though my hand is a very good theory shove, and even in all this action and stuff, my hand is still probably strong enough to shove for theory, comes down to what do I think he is willing to actually call offers. And I can't imagine he calls a worse hand. I can't see it happening. So if I'm going to shove this spot, it needs to be against a player that I think is a very, very fun player, or just for whatever reason thinks I'm the bluffiest bluffer of bluffers.
And that, my friends, is the difference between a good player and a great player. Knowing when to not go full send, knowing when to not yeet it in there for, pot on the river. Knowing when to, dare I say it, protect your neck.
So in this hand, what's really, really, really important is think about what happened on each street. Think about what factors went into it and use that to figure out what your opponent's range looks like, what you can actually beat when you bet. Because if you're paying a lot of attention in these types of, just in general, if you're paying lots and lots of attention and properly breaking down both your opponent's range and your range and what it's going to be perceived on this river decision, taking these types of hands as checkbacks or knowing when to fold through on bluffs becomes much, much, much easier. So even though I think I played this a little bit tight, I think it is definitely the best way to have played this hand. I think I extracted the max value and found a way to win some extra chips by betting flop in turn and save my stack by checking back versus range that is very, very, very strong. So on that note, thank you for watching. Stay safe and healthy out there, and best of luck at the table.